Hey everybody, MTG Orzo here for PureMTGO.com with my next 20-ticket commander, Thassa, God of the Sea. Now, it's been a hot minute since I talked with you guys. I know in the game and retrospective article on Audric Master Tactician, I told you guys I would be back next week with this, but even here in China, we celebrate Christmas and New Year's, so took a bit of personal time, which just means I got to play Magic without having to record it. But I'm back now, and this deck actually took a while to put together compared to Audric, because I didn't know quite what direction to take our giant fish woman goddess in, and what I decided on was this pile. So this pile is as of 10:52 on the 7th of January 2016, under 20 tickets, using the cheapest prices for cards on mtgotraders.com. Also, another disclaimer, I believe I mentioned this in my Audric video, but I do not necessarily use the cheapest priced cards, because a lot of the cards I already own. Case in point, this Soul Ring is $5, while you can get a Commander 14 Soul Ring for 14 cents. So if you're going for a certain look to your deck, then don't look at my deck as any sort of primer for that, because this is a little bit more expensive for foils and different printings and stuff like that. But all of these cards can be purchased for less than 20 tickets, 20 US American dollars. So let's talk about this deck. Let's talk about Thassa first. So Thassa is a 3-mana 5/5 legendary enchantment creature god from Theros. It has indestructible. As long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa isn't a creature. So you count the number of blue symbols in mana costs across all permanents you control, and if it's less than 5, Thassa is just an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. Okay. And you can pay 1 in a blue. Target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. So Thassa does not inherently lend herself to control or combo like many other mono blue decks do, like Azami or maybe Arcanis, stuff like that. I know a lot of people don't like playing against mono blue. I am one of those people. Like, when I sit down with just like a dumb, tribal or fun theme deck, and the person across from me is playing Azami, I just sort of groan and know that, well, I hope they have fun because I'm not having any fun. But this deck is a way to play mono blue without being mono blue. I think if we're gonna go ahead and make a quick count, I run 2 counter spells. One of them is a draft on chaff. We have Thassa's Rebuff, a 2-mana instant speed counter target spell unless his controller pays X, where X is your devotion to blue. This is not good. It could easily be any number of 2-mana counter spells, but it is on flavor, so we run it. And that's going to be a recurring theme for this deck, is that a lot of concessions are made to flavor because I wanted to make this deck fun. It's not a hyper-competitive Thassa list, but it is fun. You're going to remember more games that you play with this than you are going to remember with your Azami deck, in my opinion. Everyone is entitled to play EDH the way they want. I personally own an Azami deck. You can't, if you're looking at the sidebar of my available commanders, it's not there because I recently traded off an Ancestral Vision. So most of my blue decks have got the little yellow triangle with the exclamation point because I traded away my Ancestral Visions and now they're not legal. But this deck is fun. in my opinion, and I really enjoy playing this deck. Over the holidays, I was able to spend a lot more time actually playing this deck for fun than I did with Odric. And I have to say, I think I like this deck a lot better even than Odric. Before I continue, the other counterspell is Dismiss, which is my personal favorite counterspell in the game. And it has water on it. So I run a similar deck to this in paper with Lorthos the Tidemaker as the commander. I won a Commander 2014 to Fairy deck in a Commander pod back when they came out, and I'd never played Mono Blue EDH before then. I just thought it was kind of boring, but I kind of got excited by Lorthos and made this really cool, flavorful deck, and it's my number one deck that I give to people when I'm teaching them how to play in real life, because it's got I think blue is the most important color to explain to people when you're teaching them Magic, because it can do, I mean, blue gets a lot of shit for this, but blue can do everything. It's got creatures, it's got spells, it's got tempo, it's got card draw. You learn all of the biggest importance of Magic by playing blue. Blue with other colors. I'd say the next one you want to play with is black, because black teaches you that the creatures you have and the life you have are not as important as necessarily the cards that you have left in your deck or other abilities that you have. I think if you're trying to teach limited or other spells like that, you really need to focus on green and red, and to a lesser extent white. Just formats where, you know, it's going to be one more on the ground when you're swinging dudes. But in EDH, there's just things that you need to know, and it's encapsulated in mana, card draw, specifically card advantage, and tempo. So I think Mono Blue has all of those. Blue plus other colors has all of those as well. It's what makes blue such an integral part of EDH, and it's what makes a lot of people dislike blue in EDH because of how they perceive it. But that's a big long rant just to say that this deck would be a great place for a new player to Magic to start on. While the Odric deck was a little narrow, and even new players might get frustrated because they're seeing their opponents do all this crazy stuff, and they're hitting with 1/1s and 2/2s. The Odric deck was more for the paper player who's coming into Moto for the first time to play Commander and wants a budget tournament to get used to the format, to get used to the UI, and is easy on the wallet. This one, while being all those things that Odric was, is a deck that I would sincerely recommend to new players. And so with that long rant out of the way, we're going to go through this deck. I'm going to go card by card and talk about all of them, sort of why they made it in over something comparable, perhaps, if I remember. We're going to talk about the theme of the deck. We're going to talk about, what the deck is trying to do. And then I'll put that up. I'll give a little explanation, and then maybe in a few days, maybe a week, I'll have a series of games that I really think exemplify this deck and show players what it can do. I'll also be providing some upgrades to the deck if you have more funds available to you at a later time. So the third time I've stopped this rant. This time I promise we're going to start going over the deck. So first off, we have our very first land is Blighted Cataract, an uncommon for Battle for Zendikar. Taps for a colorless. You can pay 5 and a blue, tap it, sacrifice, draw 2 cards. It's card advantage on a land for if you have 6 mana, sacrificing this land is not a huge deal, and it's got water on it. That will also be another running theme, is me saying that cards are in here because it has X on it, because it has water, fish, probably one of those two. This is a ocean-themed deck. Excuse me. this deck makes several concessions on card choice based on art or creature type or thematic effect. So, Blighted Cataract is a pretty good land in EDH. It's easily the best of the cycle, and I mean, I'm running this in all of my blue decks now. It's just a good card. Next up, we have Cephalid Colosseum. So the Cephalids were a group of like octopus squid people from Odyssey, Torment, and that other one in the set. I don't remember. I didn't play it back then. But they're blue and they're underwater, and this is their Colosseum. It also draws you 3 cards. You have to discard 3 cards, but when you're activating this, there are 3 cards in your hand that you want to pitch. Comes into play untapped, adds a blue. You do take 1 damage, but again, this is EDH. You have 40 life. Use it as a resource. Coral Atoll. This will be our very first card choice that is suboptimal because of what is on the card art. So Coral Atoll is a land from Visions that says, Coral Atoll enters the battlefield tapped. When Coral Atoll enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return an untapped island you control to its owner's hand. You can tap it to add 1 and a blue to your mana pool. So this is from the original Karoo cycle, which the Ravnica block bounce lands get their name from. And these are way worse because A, they tap for only 1 color. Yes, it taps for 2 mana, but only 1 of it is colored. The land you have to return specifically has to be an untapped island. It can be, theoretically, it could be like a volcanic island or a watery grave, but it has to be untapped, and it can't be like a Bojuka Bog. And there's no better feeling than bounce landing your Bojuka Bog to use it next turn against a graveyard deck in EDH. But it's the ocean, man. There's, John Avon did the art. There's a little picture. There's a boat in the picture, and there's fish swimming around, and I had a foil for some reason. So this is a fun card. Get used to more cards like this. If you don't like the fact that I'm running Coral Atoll, you should probably close this review and maybe think about playing a different format besides EDH. I don't know if it's for you. Next up, we have Halimar Depths. Enters the battlefield tapped. Enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library, and you rearrange them. This card is obviously about underwater. I have a love-hate relationship with Halimar Depths. I think it could be a lot better than it is. All I wanted to do is give the option to shuffle. I'm sure that scrying 3 on a land would be way too good, but as it is, it just feels so miserable when you go turn 1 Halimar Depths, nothing on top, and no way to accelerate. You just feel like the worst thing in the universe. So it's a land that I could easily cut. An island is probably better for my mental state than this card. Speaking of islands, we have a bunch of them. I don't know the exact count anymore, but we have islands that have water on them. It was actually a long time coming trying to figure out which island I was going to use. I'm still not sold on these invasion islands, but I think they look good. I think basic lands look really good in the old border. So we have a good lot of them because we are running mono-colored. Lonely Sandbar is a cycling land that also features the ocean. Alright, this card is my favorite land in the entire Magic the Gathering. Sphyleonite. I call it Sphenulite, but that's wrong apparently. Sphenulite Temple. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can add a blue to your mana pool, or you can sacrifice it to add 2 blue to your mana pool. Mostly because if you got this card in paper from not Masters Edition, I think it's... Oh god, what set is this from? I don't know, but it's red bordered. It's really cool. It really looks nice, and it's underwater. It's very cool. Terrain Generator. Looks like looks like it could be coming out of the ocean, and I wanted a way to ramp, and we have more than enough basics to make terrain generator work. Thawing glaciers, I imagine there are some glaciers in the ocean. This is like the North Pole of the deck, and this is like a terrain generator that tutors out of your deck, and it's slower, but it's a cool card. Vintage Masters made it super cheap, so you can easily pick one up. Alright, that's it for the lands. Let's move on to 1 mana. So, we have our first Merfolk. So, speaking of Merfolk, one of the themes in this deck is sea creatures. Obviously, we have huge giant kraken monstrosities. But you need things to do in the early game. So I found Merfolk to be a really good way to do that. And I don't really see Merfolk a lot in EDH. And most of the lords can be picked up for pretty cheap. I mean, the one that's actually used that was only printed like twice online is of course $1 billion. It's like 12 and it's way out of our price range. But we have most all of them else. Most of the rest, yeah, I'm not even going to try to fix that sentence. So we have Dakra Mystic. 1 mana 1/1 from Journey into Nyx. You may pay 1 and tap it. Each player reveals the top card of his or her library. You may put the revealed cards into their owner's graveyards. If you don't, each player draws a card. So this is obviously more of a multiplayer card, but it is a source of just slow card advantage on a 1/1 that can get bigger from your lords. Enclave Cryptologist, same thing, a level up creature from Rise of the Eldrazi that loots and then draws. Just a steady stream of card advantage on your little dorks. High Tide, because sometimes you're going to need to cast your big giant monsters before you have exactly enough mana. So this kind of gets you there. Ponder, I had to go out and buy the Merfolk art with the, I think it's, you can see fish titties, but I went out and bought this one because it's more thematically relevant than the guy with 3 moons. Thassa's Ire, an enchantment from Journey into Nyx. 3 in a blue, you may tap or untap target creature. So just a little bit of control that's on flavor, has Thassa's name in it, and it's in the ocean, and Soul Ring, because, I mean, it has very little to do with the ocean, but I'm not going to argue about putting Soul Ring in my deck. Ban Soul Ring. Alright, Cyclonic Rift. Again, not entirely thematic, but it's like a, it's like a, you know, an Ocean Storm kind of. You just, like, this deck needs, blue decks need to run Cyclonic Rift. It's not a nice card, but you got to do something when they have 1 billion permanents in play. So I'm not even really talking about this. We're going to talk about the more thematically relevant Into the Royal. A 2 mana instant from Zendikar with kicker, 1 in a blue. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If it was kicked, draw a card. It's a very fun, I guess fun's not the right word, but it's a very well-costed bounce spell. It's modal, so you can bounce it in a pinch, or you can get value off of it later. And that's all I really need to say about that. Great at stopping Voltron generals, in my experience. Alright, more Merfolk. My favorite Merfolk, Merfolk Looter. 1/1, 4/2, with tap, draw a card, then discard a card. The single-handed reason, well, not the single-handed reason, but Red was supposed to get this as well. They were supposed to move into looting, and now they get the worst looting where they have to discard first and then draw. So, well, we're in blue, so we're going to take advantage of it. Great filtering on a 2 mana card. Alright, more 2 mana Merfolk. Merfolk Traders, and it enters the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card. So you loot once for a 1/2 instead of a 1/1. Really just a way to gum up the board, and maybe get some few hits in later on when you've got some lords out. Sigiled Starfish, a 2 mana 0/3 Starfish with tap scry 1. It's a Starfish. I had a foil. It scries. We're blue. I mean, I'm going to put that in the deck. All right, Spreading Seas, Zendikar Standard All-Star. A 2-mana enchantment aura, enchant land. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and enchanted land is an island. So there's a small island walk sub-theme, and to facilitate that, there is a small turn opponent's lands into islands theme. And Spreading Seas is the cheapest and most card-friendly way to do it. It does replace itself in your hand, and it's also land destruction for like Gaia's Cradles and stuff like that. Turns them into an island that they might not even be able to use as colored mana. We've got Stony Brook Banneret, which is a 1/1 for 2 Merfolk Wizard with Island Walk, and Merfolk and Wizard spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, meaning that if you have Stony Brook Banneret out, then your Merfolk traders cost 1 mana. But if you had, say, a Merfolk Wizard, like Stony Brook Banneret, so Stony Brook Banneret for some reason costs 3 mana, and you already had one out, you'd have to pay 2 mana and not 1 mana to cast it. I know there's a lot of confusion over that when I started playing, over how these double Bannerets worked, but that's how they work. So if you didn't catch it, just flip back a couple seconds and re-listen to what I said. We talked about Thassa's Rebuff, one of our 50% of our counterspell suite. Tidal Bore. Yeah, for Mercadian Masks. You may return an island you control to its owner's hand rather than pay Tidal Bore's mana cost. You may tap or untap target creature. So, oh, excuse me. This is from the same cycle that Daze is in. Or not cycle, but same mechanic in Mercadian Masks that Daze is in. Where you return an island you control and get a free spell. It's, you know, it's got a way of crashing into the boat. I'm gonna play it. Like, you can stop Alpha Swings, stop Voltron Generals, untap one of your guys for a surprise block. It's a versatile card. I guarantee you that no one in the universe will expect Tidal Bore. Vidalian Merchant is very similar to Merfolk Traders, except it is exactly the same. It is a 1/2 for 2, enters the battlefield, draw a card, then discard a card. But he's got a sweet eye patch and like a Coral Blade, so good on you, Vidalian Merchant. Then we have Coral Helm Commander, our first technically he's a lord. Another level up creature from Rise of the Eldrazi. Level up 1 is a 2-mana 2/2 to begin with, and then level 2 and 3 is flying, and then 4+ other Merfolk creatures you control get +1/+1. So just a way to pump up your board. And he's a not bad mana sink in the early turns if you don't have anything going on, or have a couple bounce spells or a counter spell for some reason. Alright. Another Lord, Master of the Pearl Trident, 2-mana 2/2. Other Merfolk creatures you control get +1/+1 in Island Walk. It's a very, very good card. Sapphire Medallion. Blue spells you cast cost 1 less. We have a lot of blue spells, and some of them are pretty pricey. So Sapphire Medallion is welcome. Alright, Thought Vessel from Commander 15. I'm liking this more and more in any deck that draws any number of cards. Like, I like this more than Reliquary Tower in a lot of decks because the added ramp is really good. Like, I'm hard pressed to run a Reliquary Tower in mono red, but sometimes, especially in like my Duretti deck, it will get cards in its hand and I'll have to discard. And I guess like if I have Duretti, then I don't mind discarding, but you know what I mean. And having a mana accelerant instead of a land, it makes a lot of difference. This is a very, very succinct card. I'm glad it exists. All right, 3 mana. We've got Cephalid Looter, our first Cephalid. I think he's the only Cephalid that survived my original culling of this deck list. Target player draws a card, then discards a card. It's a slightly more aggressive Merfolk Looter that costs more, but it can also target. So if you're playing multiplayer and want to help out a buddy, then Cephalid Looter obviously beats out Merfolk Looter. But both of these are in here because looting is one of my favorite non-named mechanics in Magic. I think it's brilliant. Just being able to pay something so I can trade a card in my hand for something else seems very good. Basically turns all the cards in my hand into, like, pay a non-zero amount, draw a card. It's very, very good. It's not card advantage, it's just card filtering. Chasm Skulker is our Squid Horror. Is a 1/1 for 3. When you draw a card, put a 1/1 counter on him, and when he dies, you put X 1/1 blue squid creature tokens onto the battlefield with Island Walk, where X is the number of 1/1 counters on Chasm Skulker. So Chasm Skulker, if you play it turn 3, it draws a bunch of cards, eventually bites a Wrath, and now you have 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 or 20 squid tokens that may or may not be unblockable. The Island Walk is not like irrelevant in this deck where we force people to have islands. Excuse me. Compulsive Research, my favorite blue draw spell. Has nothing to do with the sea. Mana War, however, is a jellyfish. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature to its owner's hand. Very, just a solid tempo play. You get a 2/2 and bounce their guy. Obviously, you can't play this on an empty board, or you'll just bounce it back to its hand, but whatever. It's a good card. And for some reason, I didn't get the Visions art. I got the Jace v. Chandra, but whatever. We have another Lord, Merfolk Lord. Other Merfolk creatures you control get +1/+1. Oh, I'm sorry. This card is Marrow Regery. I don't know what a Regery is, but whenever you cast a Merfolk spell, you may tap or untap target permanent. So this is not necessarily as, busted or powerful or cheap as the other ones, but, we have enough Merfolk spells where, the ability, comes in handy enough of the times to warrant, actually talking about it. It's more than 0, so. Wake Thrasher is a 1/1 for 3 Merfolk Soldier. Whenever a permanent you control becomes untapped, Wake Thrasher gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So, let's say you cast this on curve on turn 3 and all you have are Wake Thrasher and 3 islands. When you untap, Wake Thrasher is a 4/4. If you play a land and swing and cast a 4-drop, you untap and he is a 6/6. So he really does bring the beats faster than a lot of people expect. Merfolk Sovereign, another Lord. Oops, I dropped something. Merfolk Sovereign. Other Merfolk creatures you control get +1/+1. Tap, target Merfolk creature you control can't be blocked this turn. His ability is really only good with Thassa Adele, which we'll talk about in a second. The other Merfolk, aren't necessarily going to be better, but what can you say? Speaking of which, we have Thassa Adele. I'll go back for Old Man in the Sea, I promise. Thassa Adele Inquisitor, a 3-mana 2/2 from Worldwake. She has Island Walk, and whenever she deals damage to a player, combat damage rather, bribery. So search an opponent's library. Well, it's worse than bribery, acquire is the one I'm thinking about. So you search the damaged opponent's library for an artifact, exile it. You may cast it until end of turn. So it's great if they're running a lot of mana rocks, or if you've got a bunch of open mana. It's a great way to find just kind of game-winning artifacts. And she's a Merfolk. It's perfect. Here we go. Old Man of the Sea is a 3-mana 2/3. You may choose not to untap Old Man of the Sea during your untap step. Gain control of target creature with power less than or equal to Old Man of the Sea for as long as he remains tapped. This is our Old Man in the Sea is our Vidalcan Shackles stand-in. Obviously, Vidalcan Shackles could go in here, but Old Man in the Sea will have to do. He's good at snatching little dudes, and his name is cool, and the picture is awesome. So, shut up. Quicksilver Fountain. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts a flood counter on target non-island land he or she controls of his or her choice. That land is an island for as long as it has a flood counter on it. At the beginning of each end step, if all lands on the battlefield are islands, remove all flood counters from them. So this is our number one enabler for having a bunch of islands on the field. So basically, at the beginning of each player's turn, they have to turn one of their lands into an island. Just an island. Not an island in addition to its other types. Yeah, your Urborg is an island. Your Gaia's Cradle is an island. Your Ancient Tomb is an island. And a lot of decks, especially like greedy mana bases, will overvalue this card, and they will gack it before every land is an island, in which case the flood counters are still on there. Actually, now that I'm reading that, I'm gonna have to cut that all out. That's wrong. I've been playing with this card wrong. Whoops. Well, I'm not sure. Hold on. I'm gonna go to Gatherer, I think. Alright, here we are. We are at the Gatherer page for Quicksilver Fountain. Yeah, okay, so I was right initially. The land stays an island until a flood counter is removed, even if Quicksilver Fountain leaves the battlefield. I have no idea how the game remembers that, but okay, so I am right. So we're gonna go back to the deck tech. So yeah, so a lot of decks will overvalue how good this card is and kill it before its end step trigger, in which case all of their fancy lands are still islands. Okay, Worn Power Stone is ramp. I don't need to talk about it. Alright, give me a second. I'm all tuckered out. We're almost there, kids. Fact or Fiction, one of the best blue spells in the game. Nothing to do with the ocean. Thassa's Emissary is a 3/3 crab for 4 with Bestow that you're never going to cast. When it or an enchanted creature deals combat damage, draw a card. So just a cool crab, got Thassa's name in it, source of card advantage. Wash Out. It has wash in its name, which is why it made it in. Return all permanents of the color of your choice to their owner's hands. Not great, but good enough normally that you can like wipe tokens or wipe the biggest threats off the board. So definitely worth running. Bident of Thassa. It's Thassa's weapon. It is 2 and 2 blue for legendary enchantment artifact. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. And then you can pay 1 and a blue, tap the artifact. Creatures your opponents control attack this turn if able. So it's like a weird coastal piracy goblin diplomats enchantment artifact. Not sure what they were going for, but there it is. Makes all of our little unblockable dudes way better though. So there's that. Concentrate, because the guy looked like he had a scuba mask on, and I wanted another draw spell, and I never like. I love Harmonize, so I figured why don't I run Concentrate. Dismiss is my favorite counterspell in the game. Jolting Merfolk is a 2/2 for 4 from Nemesis with Fading 4. If you don't know what Fading does, no one blames you. You can remove a Fade counter from Jolting Merfolk to tap target creature. So this is there. This is like Parallax Wave, basically, for when you really need it. It comes down, and it just taps down the board. And then you can usually just Alpha Swing whenever you cast this spell. Well, speaking of Alpha Swings, Whelming Wave, 2 and a blue, rare from Born of the Gods. Return all creatures to their owner's hands except for Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. Very thematic, and we have lots of Krakens, Octopus, Serpents, Leviathans in our deck, and clearing the board for them to run around unhindered is very sexy. Hedron Archive, if it will load. Hedron Archive and Thran Dynamo are ramped to get up to our big stuff. 5 mana Mole Drifter, everyone's favorite fish. 5 mana 2/2, enters the battlefield, draws 2 cards. You can evoke it for divination. Extremely versatile, and it's a flying fish. Rush of Knowledge. We have a lot of permanents with high converted mana cost. So this card says draw cards equal to the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control. So sometimes this can be a 5 mana do nothing, and sometimes it can be 5 mana draw 8. I'm willing to take that risk. Devastation Tide. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand. You can pay 5 for it, or you can miracle it for 1 and a blue. This is the more thematic Cyclonic Rift, mostly because this has Tide in its name. And here we get to our first Kraken / Sea Monster. Storm Surge Kraken. So this is a 5 mana 5/5. And who says blue doesn't get creatures? With Hexproof from Commander 14, and has Lieutenant, which is shorthand for as long as you control your commander, something happens. So this has Lieutenant, Storm Surge Kraken gets +2/+2, and whenever it becomes blocked, you may draw 2 cards. So because our general is a nigh unremovable, indestructible enchantment for most of the game, getting Storm Surge Kraken to stick around as a 7/7 hexproof for 5, and when it gets blocked, draw 2 cards is not unreasonable. It's just a fun card, and look, it's just messing up. It's messing up all those people. We've got Ugin's Insight, which is similar to Rush of Knowledge, but you scry X, where X is the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control, then draw 3 cards. So this card skirts around the problem of you having no permanents other than lands when you have this in your hand, because this will at least draw you 3 cards. This is at least a worse Concentrate or a Sorcery Speed Jace's Ingenuity. At best, you can scry away the top 8 like garbage cards of your library, or pick the best 3. It's really versatile in this deck. Gauntlet of Power makes blue mana, it high tides every turn. Gilded Lotus is some ramp, because we just need ramp. Okay, now we're into our big dudes. This is the fun part of the deck. So we have, to start things off, we've got the staple Thassa's Bounty. 6 mana sorcery, draw 3 cards, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So this card is bad, but it's got a clam with stuff in it, and there was one time where a guy Vampiric Tutored for his win condition on his turn for some reason, and I Thassa's Bountied him, and it was sweet. Brine Elemental, a 6 mana 5/4 from Time Spiral. It has Morph 7, and when it's turned faced up, each opponent skips his or her untap step. So this is a brutal lockdown card. Just one turn, you're like, I need them not to do anything. Sorry. Skip your next untap step after you've made all your big plays, and then continue your next turn unimpeded. Part the Water Veil. Alright, this is our only extra turn card in the deck because it's thematically relevant. It has water in its name. You can take an extra turn after this one and exile it, but you can pay Awaken 9, and if you do, it's Awaken 6, so you turn one of your lands into a 6/6. Yes, you're right, it's not very thematically relevant, but I'd be remiss to have a blue deck that didn't try and squeeze some sort of extra turn card into it. Shipbreaker Kraken is a 6 mana 6/6 Kraken with Monstrosity 4 for 8. And when it becomes monstrous, tap 4 target creatures, or up to 4 target creatures rather. Those creatures don't untap as long as you control Shipbreaker Kraken. So you cast this on turn 5 or 6 as a 6/6, and then next turn or the turn after that you come monstrous, in which case you just tap down their biggest things, and then they're constantly unable to do anything. That was a cool card, cool art. He's like a giant shrimp. He's a jumbo shrimp. More weird color hate in Inundate, and that rhymed for some reason. 3 and 3 blue sorcery. Return all non-blue creatures to their owner's hand. We don't have any non-blue creatures, so yeah, that one goes in the deck. This is much more thematic than Cyclonic Rift. It also has the chance to completely do nothing, in which case, like, in the event that your opponent is running a blue heavy deck. But if that's the case, then don't cast it. Don't blame me. Just don't cast it. Alright, next up, we got 7 drops. We got Phyrexian Ingester, my favorite blue card of all. He looks kind of like a sea monster, like a weird sea crab. He's basically duplicate, but blue and much cooler art. And he gets +X+Y. And this card was printed in 2011, so... Oh my god, this card was printed in 2011. Oof. Okay. So, Colossal Whale is a 7 mana 5/5 whale with Island Walk. Whenever it attacks, you Oblivion Ring a creature. So they get swallowed up by the whale. I think that's so cool. This card is so cool. Thanks, Wizards. Kraken of the Straits. Creatures with power less than the number of islands you control can't block it. This has one of the worst arts in Magic the Gathering, but it's okay. Scourge of Fleets is a 7 mana 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, return each creature your opponents control with toughness X or less to its owner's hands, where X is the number of islands you control. So casting this on like a board full of weenies just makes them cry, and it's the best feeling in the universe. Traumacritus or Traumacritus, I don't know, I don't speak Greek, is a 7 mana 8/8 hexproof unless it's attacking or blocking, and it can't be blocked unless all creatures block it. So you tap down one of their guys for some reason, I don't know, maybe you have Marrir Jure out, and you can just swing it unimpeded, and he's a giant, huge monster. What's not to love about this guy? He just looks like he enjoys being his huge monster self, and I appreciate that. I'm just now realizing that I don't have Stormtide Leviathan in here for some reason, and I don't know why. I don't even think I own a Stormtide Leviathan. Let me check. I don't think so. Oh, you guys are getting to see how the sausage is made. Stormtide. Nope, I don't own it. Well, Stormtide Leviathan should be in here. It should be in here over Tidal Kraken, because Stormtide Leviathan costs 1 penny. So, Lorthos the Tidemaker is a 8 mana 8/8 legendary octopus, and when it attacks, you may pay 8 mana. If you do, tap up to 8 target permanents. Those permanents don't untap during their controller's next untap step. So, in weird, like, Magic Goldfish land, if you just, each of your opponents, like, basically if you're playing 1v1 and you're both just playing lands for 8 turns and you cast this, you've won the game, because now you can just constantly tap all their stuff down. It's just very, very mean and not nice. Like I said, he's the general of this deck, the version of this deck that I run in paper. Tidal Kraken is an 8 mana 6/6 unblockable. Not very exciting. Cool art though, very cool art. Alright, we got 9 mana for Breaching Leviathan, another new Leviathan from Commander 14. A 9 mana 9/9. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, tap all non-blue creatures. They don't untap next turn. Just a very powerful way, another way to get your alpha strikes while you can. And again, it has cool art. And Tomas Jed Rusek really knows how to put those scale birds to work. I can really see how big this Leviathan is. 2 X spells. We have Blue Sun Zenith, which looks like they're weird underwater people. Draw X cards, instant speed, shuffle it. You know what it does. And Displacement Wave. New rare from Origins, but it had a wave on it. Return all non-land permanents with converted mana cost X or less to their owner's hand. Once you got a couple nice big fatties, you cast this for little, and it's like a Cyclonic Rift. It's a more fair Cyclonic Rift in that regard. And that's it. This has gone on for quite longer than I expected, and once again, I can't. Okay, I did it. So I hope you're excited about this deck. I'm gonna run it through some games, see how it does. So before I head out, just want to let you guys know that if you're interested in listening to me ramble on more about Magic the Gathering online, specifically EDH, come check out my channel, MTGO Orzo on YouTube, and these videos go up there before they go up on PureMTGO. So if you really are a savvy viewer, you can catch what's going on first and snatch up all these penny rares and drive up the price to make me look like a fool when it gets published. So yeah. Thank you guys. I will see you in some games.